with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When the Pharisees, with some scribes who had come from Jerusalem, gathered around Jesus, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees, and in fact all Jews, do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of the elders. And on coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things that they have traditionally observed: the purification of cups and jugs and kettles and beds. So, the Pharisees and scribes questioned him. Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands? He responded, Well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts. You disregard God's commandment, but cling to human tradition. He summoned the crowd again and said to them, Hear me, all you, and understand. Nothing that enters one from the outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defile. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within and they defile. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There are a few more of you here today than there were last night. We had a pretty slim crowd, I think. I'm not sure where they all were. I was here. In my regular day job, not my deacon job, but my regular day job, I travel frequently. And to tell you the truth, I must sympathize with the apostles in this gospel. When traveling, it is tough to wash your hands. The sink is always out of soap. Sometimes the water does not work. Sometimes the water looks worse than my hands. One of my traveling companions washes with Coca-Cola from time to time. Some years ago, I was asked to develop a new seed business for small farmers in India. In the end, it came to nothing, but I did get to go for several trips visiting small 2- and 3-acre farms. Invariably, after we'd been to the field, we would sit and have tea in the yard with the chickens and the children and the dogs running around, and we would sip sweet, milky tea and eat cookies, but no water. By far, the most important thing, though, was to accept the hospitality and listen to the farmer. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I would get a blessing from the grandmother, but not a place to wash my hands. The honesty of what they had to offer, freely given, was by far the most memorable and wonderful part of it. So hold that thought and let's take up Mark's Gospel. This reading still is early in the Gospel. Not long before this scene, Jesus is fed 5,000 people on the side of a hill, very far away from the villages, and certainly not water for ritual purification. After this, they are going through the countryside, and Mark writes, whatever villages, towns, or countrysides he entered, the people laid the sick in the marketplace and begged him that they might touch only the tassel of his cloak. And as many who touched were healed. Jesus and his apostles are wandering the countryside without a home. They're ministering to the people. They depend completely on what little hospitality the poor and the sick had to offer them. The most important thing for the apostles was not having water to wash with, but to be with Jesus as he ministered to the people, to be present to them and accept whatever they had to offer in return. So against this unbelievable moment of God among his people, healing the people of God, the Pharisees arrive. And what do they note? Not the healing, but they note that the apostles don't wash their hands. Think about that for a moment. Jesus responds and he says, this is not a custom of God, but a human custom. The laws of ritual washing were originally intended for the priestly class, but the point is obvious. The Pharisees see people with barely food and water, and they complain about hand washing. They're getting it wrong. So think about this scene differently. If the apostles do not have water for ritual washing, it is because the Pharisees have not offered it. The Pharisees commit the greater sin against the law of Moses by failing to offer the hospitality that Moses required. They got the most important thing wrong. Most commentaries on this passage state that Mark uses this moment to show Jesus as the new giver of law. Jesus reorders the law to insert human compassion that we might get the most important things right. Pope Benedict, quoting the Second Vatican Council, taught that humanity is the source, the focus, and the aim of all economic and social life. Our laws need humanity inserted into them. The Church's social teaching is to bring humanity into balance with our laws. Immigration, care for the poor, prison reform, death penalty, invariably they conflict with one set of laws being set down that ends up in conflict with a more important set of laws regarding human dignity. The Church calls us to get the most important things right. Jesus says it is our internal motivations that condemn us: unchastity, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, folly. Regulating those things in myself or in another is hard. It's easy to identify an action that is wrong, to make a law about it, but it is much more difficult to understand why someone is in the wrong. See, it's easy to find, for example, a person without correct paperwork. It is more difficult to overcome my own indifference to ask what drove them to be here without correct paperwork, and then to care about the answer. If I had to pick an overriding feature of my ministry and my own secular work life, it has been to find that ordered balance between humanity and the laws needed for a just society. How do we reach that balance and keep it ordered by our faith? How do we do that? As a business manager, it is something that I've sometimes gotten wrong. For that, I'm really sorry, and I work to make it better. As a minister, I also recognize that the church has strayed from correct order at times. The recent grand jury report in Pennsylvania documents that failure, and my heart aches for the victims. I know that justice is deserved for those who have committed crimes. When I gave this homily last night, Father Carey told me that I'd climbed into a dark hole and was having a hard time getting out. So let me share with you a ladder that I've found. It's not much, but it is what I have to offer you today, so I hope that you might accept it. My first assignment as a deacon 17 years ago was to administer a parish following the removal of a priest for misconduct. It was not an easy chore, but it was my work to help the church make things right afterwards. My experience of the church for the last 20 years is of the church trying to heal itself and those injured by the church, and to make the church a safe environment. I love the church, and I am truly an optimist, and I believe that this is the good work that needs to be done. I've experienced faithful laity, religious, and clergy trying to get that balance of safety, ministry, and justice in right order. And I'd be happy to talk to you more about that after Mass if you'd like to know. A sadness about Pennsylvania is that we as church aspire to be something different. Also, I know from ministry and secular work life that the church is not unique in this type of human sinfulness. It is, however, my belief and my experience that the church is able, with God's grace, to find the just balance and model a path forward of humanity, humility, and faith, not just for us, but for all of society. By grace, we get so much right in this world. We join with God's healing by simple but rigorous honesty, to be human, offer what we have, to be holy and compassionate.